then we'd have offices and storage in that area also. That office that we're adding, what was that office we're adding there?
The after-school program and the PE teacher.
Okay. So we have an after-school program office in here in the kitchen, in the second serving line. We're going to take that and put that in this new addition. In this building, we'd be completely re-roofing the building. Instead of going back with a metal, which is very expensive, we're looking at putting basically a single ply roof over insulation, a colored membrane with battens, which means it will essentially look like a metal roof, but you don't have the problems with the movement and the seams on it. And it allows us to take the insulation and move it up to the roof deck, which is what code requires now. We will also sprinkle the building. This building, under current code, would require sprinkling. Since we're doing so much work, we need to bring that up to code. So we're changing where the insulation is right now. It's above the ceiling, we're putting it at the roof deck, and then we're adding sprinkler to the building. Replacing all the finishes, floors, ceilings, painting, all toilet partitions, putting up new lights, new air conditioning throughout, renovating the kitchen area, replacing the hood, the serving lines. Right now you have one that's being operated. We make that 2 operational serving lines. You actually have space for 2. One right there and one there, but one's being used as an office. So it's extensive work in that area.
Greg,
Yes, ma'am.
each one of the classrooms has its own air conditioning unit.
It does.
Are you going to leave that, or are you going to, is that gonna be a central air?
We will take out that, what they're called P-tacs. They're through the wall units. We're going to take those out and close the opening. And we're going to go back in what's known as mini split units. Every classroom will still have its own unit, so they have its own control. It'll be a different type of system, much more efficient than what you have now, but they will still have their own units. Yeah. Central system would be difficult to retrofit here with the metal roof on it. You also lose some of the controllability. And what we find is if you have one unit that serves 4 or 5 classrooms, 3 out of those 4 classrooms, the teacher's not happy. So typically we found that individual units perform better in a classroom environment. Other questions about the renovation itself?
The existing bathrooms you're gonna convert into
Closets. And you can actually see the bathrooms. These are the bathrooms right here in the classroom. They're very small. What we'll do is we'll just convert them to storage areas, closets, and each teacher now has some closet area.
Are there any other restroom space out through that building, just like on either pod?
There are no
Just for
restrooms here.
emergencies?
There are no restrooms here. No restrooms here other
Is
than
that
the
everything
individual
would
ones.
be?
So, and the other restrooms that are there would be in an office area back in the kitchen, but those would be for staff and not for the students.
You were gonna address the teacher's lounge too. I think they have very limited.
And that would be part of this area up here. And if you notice, we also with this allow circulation to be better. Instead of having to go around that center core, the circulation of those straight
That's
through.
right there.
But yes, thank you. In that core area, we'd be adding a teacher lounge area and toilet area, workroom area.
It's very, very small now. It's not very convenient for the teachers to use. Greg, could you speak about whether if we, I'm not saying this is happening, but if the board decided to build a new primary school, the cost of that versus the renovation of an existing building like
We're showing this cost right now, somewhere about $8.5 million to do this modification. If you were to build a new one of this size, I'd expect you to be closer to $20 million. Most of the elementary schools we're designing right now are within that range. And it seems like an astronomical number. When I started this business, I hate to go back to what Dr. Miller said, it's been a while. We were building schools at $30 a square foot. And today we're building schools at $200 a square foot. Huge difference in what time is done with that.
So it's gone up a pretty big bit even since we put in the new elementary school,
Yes.
because it was what, 14 and a half, 15?
Exactly. It's gone up that much in that time. And it's every year. It goes up a percentage every year. And if you start looking at what you've expended on the high school, your original high school project probably was about $10 million for that entire project. Now we're looking at putting a gym out there that costs more than the original high school. Time is the difference. Any other questions on the Bay Primary School?
Greg, you said court area for the restrooms?
The core area, I'm just calling that the central part of the building.
Okay.
I'm calling that the core.
I understand.
It seems like a long way for those students to travel.
To get from here to there, valid point.
That's why I was wondering if you wanted maybe like an emergency, like a small one on each pod, so if you had a child that needed to get to one quickly, that
That
it
is
might be.
something we could look at, we could certainly come down at these ends. The problem is, if you look at that configuration, there isn't any excess space. The classrooms, there's no storage, there are no mechanical rooms, there are no resource, it's a full classroom. So if you do that, what would happen is you'd lose a classroom in order to accommodate that.
The in classrooms, the ones that are not on the hallway, share a common bathroom, right?
Yes.
Is there, I mean, could somehow that kind of melt into this whole thing to where there could be a hallway or something?
Down the center to get those.
Right, I mean, just exactly what Ms. Lang said is, I'm not, that's a long way, I think I already said that.
Yes.
For those kindergartners, and possibly even the first graders. If you had a facility where if you needed to send a child quickly, would that be a consideration to have maybe classrooms on both sides to have, because that's a large bathroom. I mean, it possibly could be, designed where it could be for handicapped students.
Which it would have to be.
Right.
My concern is if you bring a quarter all the way down there, you're losing space on each little
It
classroom. I
absolutely
don't know
is.
if you can do that. It might be better to try to come in this space somewhere and carve that corner out. Your classrooms are somewhat larger than state standards. If I recall correctly, we're 780 or so. The state standard is 750. So we could take a space maybe centrally located in this wing, take those two toilets and expand them a little bit and take a little bit of space out of that classroom. One classroom instead of affecting two that would then become substandard. Now, you could create substandard classrooms for standard and make them special ed, but they could not, if they fall below 750 square feet, they would not be considered a standard classroom.
I do understand.
But we can certainly look at that. My initial thought is we get to the center of the quarter and we try to take those spaces you had and widen them up enough that they can become handicapped, which may take 3 or 4 feet out of the classroom instead of trying to take them out of that, create that corner.
You're right, and my rationale for that was that shared bathroom is
It's a large
larger,
space.
than the tiny ones that are in the classrooms on the hallway.
And you can actually, part of that is because there's a vestibule between,
Mhm.
so you have an additional 3 or 4 feet there. We'll look at options.
Okay, that would be a consideration.
What is the difference in size of a PE facility in elementary school versus a middle school or high school?
The state has requirements for each of them, and you can design what you want. State minimum requirement for PE for elementary is 5,000 square feet. The minimum requirement for middle school is 16,000 square feet. Minimum requirement for high school is 22,000 square feet. Put that in perspective, we're building high school gyms from 50 to 100,000 square feet. So your current high school gym is a state minimum at 22,000 feet. So it gives you some idea. State sizes, their minimums are adequate at a point, but at some point you're going to say you're not. And right now your school currently is not. At an elementary, 5,000 feet is probably adequate.
What is that?
The new one,
The new one?
the play court is 5,000, and then we added the additional storage and office areas. And part of the instruction we had was make it comparable to Kinshasa.
Which increases it, how much from the current room they have? The
I
current
don't have
gym,
that answer, I can find it for you.
I do not know, it's a very small space. It's not comparable now in KPS. Greg, one of the things that the principal mentioned when she spoke to this group earlier this year was the need for water fountains. I think there's only one on the entire kindergarten hall, so you can imagine bringing in a class full of kindergartners from recess, that's a challenge for them to navigate right now.
And actually, as part of the state requirements, they dictate a certain number of drinking fountains per classroom.
But they won't be able to use them when they go back.
Well, right,
But they
but
won't
we
be built
have,
in anyway.
Except if they have bottle fillers and Tesla's bottle
By the
fillers.
time we get this building, we hope it back.
I was gonna
Yeah,
ask
right.
about that, can the fountains now have the bottle fillers in
We're
them?
seeing much more of a request for those bottle fillers than we have in the past, and since March, we're putting them in almost every building where we put drinking fountains. Because nobody wants to drink from that spigot. If you have a bottle you can put up there and it's touchless, it's much more sanitary. I think we're gonna, they're relatively expensive, but I think we're gonna see much more of a demand for that, for access to water. And as we construct these areas, there will be drinking fountains associated with those areas. Other questions? Twin Oaks is relatively simple. You have some water coming in the back doors to the gymnasium. You don't have extra outside drinking holes for the playfield. You don't have a place for students to stand out of the sun for the playfield. So what we're looking at doing is just adding canopy at the back of the gym, right here. Concrete wall and adding some exterior freeze-proof drinking fountains. Very simple, very straightforward on campus. Just another picture of what that looks like, gymnasium and the exterior canopy. Ninth grade academy, this was another project that was talked about 5 years ago, and that is pavement. We did do some improvements on pavement a while back. There's always been a discussion about how to get the buses off that site and try to cut down some of the restrictions. The thought is that we'll come around the back of the building. This is not a current photograph. There's actually a parking lot here and some more pavement. We'll build a road back out here to the highway. Retention ponds there, we'll have to shift it a little bit, but build that road so you have a relief and you can bring that traffic back out without having to conflict with the other traffic that's serving both the primary school and the ninth grade academy. Because right now, this is horribly congested right here. If we can keep those buses going one direction, we take a lot of traffic off those intersections.
Have you looked at adding a canopy to the entry door for the students when they go in the gym?
We certainly could.
I think they need it, 'cause
Which door are we talking about?
The gymnasium on the side, right there on the side where the fire station is, that's where parents drop off. And there's a little, cover, or there, no, it's not, I guess it's not, there's not a cover.
We need a walkway and a covered canopy to, for the drop off right there.
That's it.
Right. We can't do it.
Probably 99% of them don't bring an umbrella, and if it's storming, you're soaked, I mean.
And it takes the parents
That'd be
several
simple to do,
minutes
yeah.
to get from when they turn in at the office area, to go from the office area to the drop off for the gymnasium. It takes several minutes, not because of the number of parents, but because of the parents who dropped off can't turn back on
Getting out.
the street because of the congestion between, traffic from, Lee Primary and the buses, both flowing back into that spot, so.
I'm not gonna say this because the architect's here, but I think our maintenance people can probably do this part.
I mean, you
You
could,
don't have to
it's not
say
a
that.
hard.
You definitely can do it.
It's not a hard.
Yeah.
It's an
I
easy
just think
project.
it's-
Well, and we did last year, we extended the sidewalk for Lee Primary for car drop off because the kids were getting off in the grass and on wet rainy days, so we extended that several feet to improve that, and we could certainly do likewise.
Where is the bus drop off now on that campus? Where the kids actually drop off?
Right there.
It'll be to your left, Greg, in that open area.
Right here?
No, sir.
Up here?
Yes, sir.
That's where the buses live.
That's where you're gonna come over a little bit more to the left. They're lined up right in there, and that's where they drop off, a little further back.
But now the parents still drop off at the,
To the side.
At the gymnasium.
That's what I'm getting. My question is there a way to reroute the parents' traffic instead of trying to come out there where the only exit is one way and bring the parents to this intersection up there of Magnolia if the buses come in that area that's just east of their
The buses come out that way. They'll
now,
come,
but they're talking about
Yeah.
coming out the other way, aren't
They're
they?
gonna come
Yeah.
out this way.
if you could separate them.
So if you could bring the parents out to that intersection, that would be a heck of a lot better.
True.
Sure, you
Yeah.
could, and you could do that, you just wouldn't want the bus traffic, crossing with the parent.
Right, but
On the
I-
campus,
but
it's
we-
going to.
And then maybe the buses come back and here's something, and then keep the,
Oh, I thought the buses used that your pin was just on, that
They
right
do.
there. Is that
right
what-
here's what they use.
That's what they use?
They come in and exit from that one drive, and the area there where.
Well, I thought
right
we were
there
talking
is
about
where-
them exiting the new area that's being built.
If they're coming from the primary school, they'll go straight across on the road up there. But then, if they're going on to the middle school, they'll go that way, on out that way.
Okay, I was just, didn't know how that
And
was
because
all
they're
configured.
returning to the shop, they're going right there, so that again causes congestion turning left on the 195 to get back to the shop, the ones that do return there, so you've got, it's pretty backed up.
It's heavy enough that if you weren't dropping and walking in by 7:40, 7:42, you're gonna be tight getting in there trying to route out with all of that.
Right now, you got the parents, the only recommended way to leave is to take a right there and turn back to 195. If you could somehow get them to that intersection, they have the option of going 3 directions.
You can,
And maybe could relieve some of that congestion, or a parent would choose to leave to go another route to avoid congestion.
Right.
right now you beg for the
Yeah.
left, literally
Well,
beg.
once I drop off early enough, it's not a concern, but.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about for primary schools, actually using this now as the parent drop-off.
Well,
Through that.
that's, teacher parking there, they drop off closer to the,
Oh, in the new scenario.
Oh,
they're actually
yes,
coming through
right.
that parking lot to get out of stack.
and that would help tremendously.
So that's one of the revisions we can show. Other questions? High school. Quite a few potential projects on this campus. This is even this is not current because it does not show the multi-purpose, but it's the most current I could find in Google Earth. But it shows you basically what the campus currently looks like. A little bit more of an image of it. Football field, you've done a great deal of work on it. Multi-purpose, of course, was built here. Baseball and softball fields. The existing building. Some of the existing conditions. The reason I'm showing this is one of the major projects that's being proposed is an entrance into the football and the baseball stadium. And this is what a visitor sees as they come up to that site right now. So part of the thought is to try to create a more welcoming entrance to those facilities.
We've been trying for years.
Yes, yes. 5 years ago, we had the same conversation.
And it's not just that, it's an ankle buster in some of those areas, and the
Yes.
handicap access is not the best.
So this tries to identify the various potential projects that we're currently discussing. First one would be adding a parking lot up at the band practice field, which is in this area. Potentially adding parking lot where you currently have parking, but it's parking on dirt. And paving that, that'd create about 70 spaces. At some point, we'd love to build some parking back here, which would be handicap access to the football stadium and other people. We'd create a parking lot back here and an access drive. Eventually, it'd be nice to create a drive back here and put visitor dressing area back there. And in the proposal, you'll see that that's supposed to be a combination visitor dressing and wrestling practice area. So that is one of the proposals that's in the cost estimates. Adding a hitting cage up here and a screen, similar to what you would have at the baseball field. Significant improvements around the baseball field, and that would include dugouts, home and visitor. It would include a new press box, include new lights on the existing poles. And then a major part of it is this plaza and entrance right here. This will create a whole new entrance. There'd be brick pilasters and fencing, metal fencing, ticket booths across here and ticket booths back here. So eventually you could have access from 2 points and egress from 2 points. All of this would be fenced in here and across here, creating a plaza underneath the grandstands and back to the baseball field. And within that area, you would have the concessions, you would have the male and female restrooms would be new, and create a different access to the stadium seats. Instead of coming from the front, you'd be coming from the rear of what's known as vomitoriums into the stadium, like you would some of the major stadiums. So you would create an opening and come up from the backside where the concessions and the toilets are. That would occur. Here's a vomitorium, and there would be one. Looking at adding additional seating at the home side, which is what the red represents. That would be concessions, male and female restrooms. When you start looking at what the restroom counts on, you'll be surprised at the number of fixtures you're required to have there based on code. It'd be 3 or 4 times what you would expect, and it'd be probably 5 or 6 times what you currently have. The restroom counts are large. Again, the ticket booth here and here, new dugouts, new seating, and new press box. One thing we're really not touching is the field. We're basically doing everything around the perimeter of that field, all new accessories or auxiliary facilities for it. The poles for the lights are adequate, so we'd just be replacing the lights with LED lights.
I don't know if the board remembers, but we had a playoff game about 3 years ago where a light shattered and fell right on top of our visitors. The principal of that school was actually, her foot was cut. She had on sandals. But fortunately, the people sitting right under the lights had like a tent, and that's the only thing that kept them from being, there was a foul ball on the first base side.
Is the drainage on the field sufficient? I mean, plus with the other if you start getting into other construction, is it
We
gonna
spent
change the
$60,000
drainage?
to redo that.
But it's still, but I mean, it's.
I haven't heard any complaint.
I've not heard any issues with drainage on this field.
What happens to the existing concession stand and bathroom facility that's there now?
Well, you're talking about these?
Yeah.
You notice I graded out because in the original master plan, we actually had shown a new facility here, which was decided did not make sense to abandon this facility. That would stay there, and then we have not determined what the function would become of that space. It could be additional dressing areas, it could be a multi-purpose, it could become wrestling. There are lots of different options for it, right?
Or do the new dugouts for the baseball field, would they have dressing areas in them?
They have a small dressing area. They have a restroom with them and a small dressing area, but it's not the size of that.
And that entrance area would avoid us having to look at all the mechanical systems and everything in the.
Correct. We provide fencing and well, that's a fence here and here and the ticket booth, and then we create some screening around that. And the fence is not chain link fence. What we're proposing is an aluminum picket fence with brick pilasters, so it looks a little bit more professional.
Similar to what's at the end of the field now?
Yes, similar to that, exactly.
I think we've got to do something from a egress standpoint for, especially handicapped and older folks coming through, and that, I love that new parking area there.
And this
Don't
was,
love it too much.
Well,
it's one of the proposals to consider not doing.
the parking across from the softball
Again.
field would be fantastic.
Yeah, 10 years from now, 5 years from now.
But, well, we really don't have adequate handicap parking for anybody. I got a ton lashing from one of our region school, senior adult person from one of those schools, because they actually failed entering. They parked on what is the home side and had to come all the way across, and it was a big game with a huge crowd, and they could not get into the bus area. So there's stories, of course, to support all of these, but I just, you know, being able to, I know that's an issue at graduation. When we used to do the graduation at the football stadium, the parking access for our handicap senior adult, cause now they park in that, what Greg indicates is the plaza area. They can drive down close, but again, that's not all paved.
Right.
And it's very different, there's a lot of different levels there, as you mentioned, trip hazards. Combination of asphalt, concrete, grass.
Oh, I had some issues getting my father in and out of there 3 years ago.
Those concessions and toilet rooms would look something like this. The concessions were shown in the center with smaller family type restrooms, and then women's and men's split up into two. So try to cut down some congestion. This shows the additional parking lot. Back here, the 70 spaces where the students are currently parking, as well as a potential for as much as 100 spaces back there.
Is that where the practice football field is now?
Yes,
And it's wet?
No, not that one.
Oh, that's not it?
Go back.
okay.
That one on the bottom right end.
It's actually over
Yeah,
here.
right.
That's
Right there.
all right.
I thought at one time you actually used
We
it.
do use that for practice, right there. But I don't know what they do now since we got the turf. Maybe ninth grade practice.
I
is down.
think you'll run some smaller groups back there again, too.
This was an image from 5 years ago with a master plan. Basically, this building was built. We've already done the stadium. This is where we were looking or envisioned the gymnasium at that point. And tonight I'll talk to you about 2 potential locations for that. And then the improvements for the plaza. You can see here the planters, the concrete. We're looking at concrete brick pavers, as I mentioned, the picket fence. So this was basically the same image that we talked to the board about 5 years ago. We're not doing that. That was an image from before. But some images of what the gymnasium could look like. Again, these were the same renderings we looked at 5 years ago. And this would be coming in from the student parking side. This would be looking at the plaza itself, the entrance from that handicap parking area we talked about down here, the plaza areas with vegetation, the new concessions and restroom in this area. This is what I was talking about, Mr. Griffin, that is not correct. That building remains. And then we have another ticket booth or entrance over here. So basically a 3D image of what could happen. Some more images of the same. This would be the image you'd see as you enter it from the student parking. More images of the plaza. To the left is the concessions, and this area is the ticket booth that comes off that handicap parking area. Part of it's trying to soften up just the mass of pavement. It's a large area back there. So instead of just having pavement and pavers, we want to have some planted areas and some places for people to be seated in there. The big element, the gymnasium. There are a tremendous number of options for a gymnasium. As I mentioned, a high school minimum size gymnasium is 22,000 square feet. Most people would not consider that adequate. We are typically designing right now gymnasiums anywhere from 55,000 up to 100,000 square feet. I'd say a typical one would be somewhere in the range of 60. It all depends on what features you put in there, how many dressing rooms you put in there, how many offices, how many seats you put in there, the type of seating you put in there, how large the courts are, how many courts you have. Do you have weight rooms, wrestling areas? The options are endless. This is where the original proposal was. Again, this comes from the master plan from 5 years ago. The concept was we would do work at the softball field, we do work at the baseball, the parking, potentially add the gymnasium right in this area. And the thought was that the existing gym's there. We could tie the new gym to the existing and potentially take advantage of the existing dressing rooms that we would not have to duplicate. And you then have, if you're having PE class, you could have the continuity of walking from one to the other. The main entrance, the exterior entrance would be here, so you would not have to walk into the building to come to an event. You could come in from the outside as well as from the inside. There would be a connection into the existing building right back here. And then ultimately, as you continue to grow, there was a concept that we could consider adding a two-story classroom addition at the back of your current classroom addition. I think once you've done that, if you ever do that, there's not much else you can do on this site. You're running out of space.
We had talked about that two-story, if we potentially were able to launch a college and career academy, to have that space dedicated for that purpose.
This is not what we talked about 5 years ago. In our office, we started looking at options. One of the advantages was the other option is you're tied to the existing gym and you can reuse some of those functions. The disadvantages are you're spending 12 million, 14 million, whatever the number is on a new gym that nobody can see. So as you drive by the building, it's not making a big statement as to the appearance of the building, or people don't necessarily know where to go to get to it. To get to that other gymnasium, you have to come down that student road at the back of the site. So what we started looking at was where else can we put the gymnasium? And our thought was, oh, shit, I hit the wrong button. Let's try again. Thought was to add it up here. So it becomes a premier focal point of the building. You then can create some parking both here and here that have access to it. And when visitors come to the gym, you know where to go. You can see it from the road as opposed to having to look for it. Disadvantage is now you have two gyms on opposite sides of the building. So there are advantages and disadvantages both, but we want to start exploring options of where it could be placed. The other big disadvantage with this option is underneath all of this is your existing storm drainage system for the building. So we have to address that, and that's a cost.
Plus, that's where the visitor parking is, I mean, so
Yes.
that's taking up.
Or the visitor football.
So,
So there are drawbacks to it.
just guessing on the original drawings where you have it, we have it at the back.
I would assume that's gonna be more cost effective.
My thought is it'd be more cost effective, yes. Especially if you take advantage of the fact that you do not have to build some of those dressing rooms.
So you could utilize some of the existing.
Yes, if we say that you have 4 dressing rooms there, PE, maybe some of the athletics, and you don't have to build those, that's less square footage you have to build. Okay, options on the floor plans. We've talked quite a bit about the style of gymnasium and what you'd like to see in that gymnasium. We obviously want to seat about 2,000. We want to be able to have a multi-level gymnasium is what the thought is, maybe a track on the upper level. So what we've done is we've developed a very preliminary plan that could show what it might look like. This actually came from our premier gymnasium, which is up in Jefferson City, and we modified it to be something that would be closer to what you're looking at. This is the bottom floor, and it is arena type or a stadium type facility in that there is seating. There's seating on 3 sides at both a lower level and an upper level. The seats at the lower level would be retractable to allow you to have 2 full-size courts sideways as well as a full-size court lengthwise, as well as, in this case, dressing rooms around the perimeter. The second floor would look like this. It would look like an amphitheater or stadium seats. Now, these would be individual seats upstairs. And then you would have a track that went around the perimeter of it. So basically a 2-story facility with a track on the upper level and fixed stadium seating. I'll show you some images of different styles of those as we go through. Again, it can be anything from the very basic to something pretty elaborate.
Greg, is this the one we would attach to the existing building?
We can
Or is
make this work either way.
Okay, or is this a standalone?
It could work either way. The building that this is modeled after was a standalone facility at Jefferson City Schools. It could touch to the building if we needed to. I was really just trying to show an image of basically what the floor plan might look like. As opposed to yours, which is a square box and has retractable seats. There's a great deal more to this. We have multiple levels, we have retractable seats, and then there will be some fixed auditorium type seats. Okay, starting at not as basic as what you have, but the next level up, I'm going to go through these as we go down, and they progressively get a little bit nicer as we go through them. This one actually has a lower play court area, a little bit of raised seating here, and if you notice, even the bleachers here are stadium type of seats, which for a lot of adults is definitely beneficial. I would much prefer to sit on that than a bench. One of the things you'll see in all of these is a lot of natural light, which helps create an openness to it, but it's not nearly as restrictive and a much warmer space. And you'll see that in almost all of these options. There is a rail between the court and where the public is, so that the public does not walk on the court, that there is a way to keep that traffic off the court area.
Is the railing fixed?
Excuse me?
The railing's fixed, you couldn't
The
drop
rail-
it when you weren't.
This
when you didn't
particular
have
railing
the public
is,
in it.
this railing is fixed. This is Southeast Bullock, and it has a combination. The home side and the visitor sides are different. This one has fixed stadium seats that are raised up. The dressing rooms are actually below that. And then we have a track at this level, at an intermediate level. Again, a lot of natural light in that area.
How many is that Southeast Bullet's the,
I'm not exact, I think it's about 1,800, I'm not sure.
that's a much smaller school?
This one is 2,000 seats. This is Stevens County and Toccoa.
That's 2,000 seats in this.
Combined, all the seats. The retractable ones and then the stadium seats that are up high.
So
If you retract these, then you lose that seat.
I'm just thinking about student convocations and those kind of things, you can always put chairs on the floor.
Yes. Yes. That does not include that space. You are correct. Again, this has a combination. This has retractable seats from the track level down to the play court. You can actually exit these by going up. You don't come down to the play court, you go up to the track to exit those seats. Again, keeping the students off the play court itself. The track level is up here, this guardrail for the track goes all the way around. These are retractable, and then the top seats are all the fixed stadium seats. So it's a combination, again, of fixed and movable. A lot of natural light, there are windows up high here and over here, as well as up at this level. This actually has a center scoreboard, and then the back stops are movable. More of a collegiate type or professional style. Another view of that same one to give you an idea of the glass up there, the natural light.
Did they use that gym for volleyball?
Yes, they do.
So just pull the seats back
They
and
do.
open it up like that?
And they have, yes. And this one's interesting. It's very much like yours. And they're right next to this, there is an existing gym that we renovated and kept, and the two gyms connect to each other. This is North Murray. Similar concept. It has the fixed seating up here, retractable seating at the end. Better view of the seating, the fixed seating along here. The track level at the upper level up in this area. This design is the one we consider our best design. We've learned from each of the others and tried to resolve some of the perceived mistakes, mistakes that we feel like we've made on those. This is up in Jefferson City, and it's the basic floor plan that I was showing you earlier. It has seating on 3 sides. That seating is all fixed and stadium type, and then we do have the retractable seats down low. You can actually get 2 full-size side porches. So the options are endless. It can be whatever you want within whatever funds you have available. It's always trying to balance those 2 items. improvements.
And come back 5 years from now.
Exactly. It's not gonna get cheaper.
Greg, there was an issue, and I think it probably is all over Leesburg, where the water table's high.
Yes. And you have some drainage issues.
And we have drainage issues in addition to that. How far could you go down knowing that the water table's high around the high school?
In terms of dropping this, I would not see this building being dropped down. I'd
Oh,
see the
okay.
bottom floor being on grade and us going up.
Okay,
I
okay.
do not see digging into a pit and creating a hole. That would not work. I agree with the water issue.
Okay.
It's also be a great deal more expensive to try to excavate all that and put this underground. I have done that only once where I was on the side of a hill and it made sense to have it at the lower level. But to dig a hole that's 20 feet deep and put it in there, I don't recommend that. Cost. A little hard to read it up here, but I think each one of you have this summary page that goes over each of the costs for the various projects. Lee County Primary consists of 4 major items. The site improvements, about $430,000, which are the roadway, the parking lots, the other site improvements. The drive-through canopy, about $160,000. Modernization, $6,792,000. The additions, a little over $1 million, for a total of about $8,400,000 for the items we've discussed at the primary school. Questions on the primary school itself? Try to break it down by item. As we get down to the high school, you'll see when Mr. Kelly comes up here, we have the list of items that are desired, and then he's stricken through some of those to show the list of items that can be supported by the SPOS.
How much participation would you get back on the primary school?
$2 million.
Two,
It's $2 million and change, but I don't remember,
not 2.5, but 2, we're dropping.
yeah, it's closer to 2.0.
Twin Oaks is the simplest one, is that covered area, about $68,800. The ninth grade academy, about $96,000. So those are pretty straightforward. The high school has 15 different components that make it up. First one is the kitchen loading dock that we haven't talked about. But we're talking about putting a loading dock out there similar to Twin Oaks, where we have a raised platform and dumpster pads, so the staff doesn't have to pick up the garbage cans to dump them into the dumpsters. It'd have a ramp, and it'd be very similar to what was at Twin Oaks.
Now they load an old truck, old school system truck with the garbage out in the back of the cafeteria, and they drive it down. And the patrons at baseball have, they get, if the wind is not in their favor, they get the effect of the garbage cans out and out. Yes, yes. This would, this was one thing we talked about as a possibility to address that need. And so, it's pretty demanding physically for our staff to have to do that. And then again, they have to transport it down by truck to the dumpsters. They've been doing that a long time.
The second item is underground storm drainage system, storm retention system. As we talked, there's some drainage issues on that site. Additions are continually placed on that site, and we have to start addressing the stormwater a little bit more proactively. So this is looking at putting a complete storm drainage system below the new parking lot at the band practice area. You're basically out of space. So we're having to start to think three-dimensionally. So this would be putting piping and storm drainage structures below that, which create a retention. It actually will be a system that works very much like a septic drainage field, except it's storm. It'd be half pipe, and there'd be gravel below it that allows the water to accumulate and eventually be absorbed by the ground. We looked at this on a couple of your projects, and we looked at alternate ways of this. Even though it's a very large number, almost $1 million, it's less expensive than other options for underground retention. So that's a major component of this. And as you do more additions out here, it becomes more critical, specifically the gymnasium. If we add 50,000 square feet of building out there, we have to address those needs. Next one is the parking lot at the band practice, which is $360,000. Resurfacing of the rear access drive. The access drive to the student parking has been needed of some pavement for a while. This is just leaving the pavement that's there, but resurfacing it with 1.5 inches of additional pavement. New parking at the softball fields at the 70 spaces, and that's $208,000. New drive at the gymnasium. If we place the gymnasium that side, if you notice there was a circular drive, a drop off there, that's what this is for. So it's associated with the gymnasium. New access drive to the visitor dressing. On the eastern side of the property, the visitor side of the football field, we've shown a new drive coming down parallel with the grandstands there, and that's that drive that would go to the visitor dressing / weight wrestling area. Softball field hitting cage, $327,000. Baseball field improvements, that would be the dugouts, the press box, the lighting, all those improvements would be $1,046,000. The concession and toilets would be $1,002,000. Visitor dressing areas, $670,000. Grandstands, and this would be the vomitorium, the additional seating would be the $670,000. $370,000. And then the large ones, the gymnasium addition at just about $12,900,000. Now this is assuming that that building is 55,000 square feet. Again, as I mentioned, I would say an average would be anywhere from 50 to 100,000 square feet. This is on the low end of that. That Jefferson County project you saw was 100,000 square feet. It also had a full weight room, which you don't need, and it had some other spaces that you already have.
And that was Jefferson City.
That was Jefferson City.
They have a small school.
They have a much smaller school.
About half our size,
Yeah.
the population, the student was.
Right up.
It's running.
Right, yeah.
Mhm.
The total estimated cost for those projects would be about $30 million. Keeping in mind that your budget is somewhere in the range of $25 million. Questions? Anything I can explain further or answer?
Back to the old concession stand and, old restaurant and football field, you gonna leave that building there? You gonna throw a pink tarp over it and call it
No,
beautiful?
ma'am, we can repurpose that, as Greg indicated, that could be a wrestling area, it
Oh,
could be,
okay.
it could serve baseball potentially, where they have more of a locker room type, our officials dress there for football. We could also, expand the concession stand there if we don't do the concessions under the stadium and address the restroom issue. I don't know if that has the space to get all the restrooms we're gonna need to, support the size of the stadium we have now.
I think there's some interest in keeping that building there, to
Pretty
figure out how to use it.
I
from
like the
from
rest
hospital
of the
staff.
concessions under the seating, I think that's.
5 years from now, Miss Ben.
You've talked about it for what, 10 years?
Yes, we have.
You don't think it's gonna go,
Well, the minute I asked Greg to come last Tuesday, after we met with, and then I could tell when we were talking with Greg, we were already hitting 25 million, because we had talked with them about 20. So I immediately called Blake Sharpton, our attorney, and the folks up at where Bucky's at. And I said,
Raymond James.
we're gonna have to be looking at 25 million. I mean, basically, that's where we are to get this. But now, let me tell you how we get there. Y'all have
I'll say
the
realistically
sheet.
how we
This
do
one?
it.
Yes, that's it. The things that are blacked out, that's what we're taking out, are delaying for 5 more years. I mean, that's the best. Now, we can do whatever y'all wanna do. Ultimately, y'all do choose these, but this was Gary taking a stab at getting back to $25 million.
so this one compares with this one? This is Greg's and this is yours?
This is Greg's.
Oh, this is Greg's, okay, I see.
All right, and this is Greg's column right
Okay,
here.
okay, gotcha.
And this is over here in the
This is
squares
yours.
where I'm doing that.
This is yours, Colin.
Right. So basically, this parking over here at softball, I've cut out. This parking at football, the access behind the football stadium, the concessions, and that visitors the grandstand modification. So basically, that brings us to 25 million, and then they got architect's fees, 6%. So we're 26, almost $27 million. So we're gonna get $2 million of funding from the state. Now then, if we do some value engineering, like let's just say we have a construction manager and stuff, and we're able to do some of this, then maybe some of these things get put back on the list. But
We would go with the construction manager the way we did for the.
I would highly
Purpose.
recommend it. I mean, that,
Let me ask on the softball parking, cause it's not a fun area. I mean, it's not that user friendly. Is there any way, and I don't know the technical terms, but I've seen some of the farmers up in Chris County do it on their dirt roads that they needed access. They basically got
Crusher
like a crush.
Crusher run.
yeah.
Could you do something like that,
Yes.
just to put some
But you know,
improvement?
with softball, they want it parking up here because they can control
Well,
the entrance. I know.
I'm thinking more for the students of when it's really
Well,
wet
no,
and
the
rainy.
student
Is there
day,
any
yeah.
way, cause there's a good bit of parking back in there daily.
All right, what we did when Greg built the high school, we have something that shows that we do not let any more water go off into that neighborhood. If we put something there, we,
Is it
Greg,
gonna
I
drain
mean,
more
you're-
off
As
into
long as
the-
it, as long as it remains porous, we're okay.
okay,
If it's not porous, then we have an issue.
right.
Uh,
So I just don't wanna flood the
I was
neighborhood.
We
just
did the
asking,
foot-
just out of
the-
curiosity.
The band, program has asked that we consider paving their practice area, and what some systems have done is they paint an actual football field on the pavement, and they use that to practice their routines.
Oh, that's
And
nice.
then it serves as parking, but if we had parking there, I don't know that we would need the,
Would it be hotter?
I've asked about that, but they seem to think that they can handle it. So, right now, they have to wait until football's through to get
Yeah.
down on the field.
So you would say we would
So-
gain parking for students on that during the
Yes,
day?
and it would save them some practice time because they're having to wait till the, you know,
Oh, it is?
6:30 or 7 whenever football's
Oh, okay.
finished.
Yeah, that, right there.
So you could take that new parking for softball and kind of shift some, letting them use it.
Yes, and another issue softball was concerned about, one,
To
controlling access, but people, young kids crossing the road because they run back to the parent's car to get something. And that's been a concern, with that drive in the back. And that's why we actually extended that sidewalk to make it accessible for, older patrons, because they had some issues walking.
So
the
this
grass.
plan is gonna retain that JV field. I knew one time we
Yes.
talked about that JV field may have to be taken out.
And Ms. Van, you notice the middle column is the in-house. I had to put in a Butler building.
I know.
You
You're gonna put lots of
see what,
shrubbery, you promised to put lots of shrubbery around it.
it's gonna be in the outfield out there. I guarantee you softball will love it.
I know.
So we'll take whatever.
So we said with our existing SPOS collections, with no growth, we could expect to collect under $18 million in total SPOS receipts from this. We're projecting 25, which would push us over into
The next plot.
the next SPOS. The gymnasium that we're considering in this, number one, we have very little wiggle room, very little wiggle room. The gymnasium that we are considering making these changes to get a new gymnasium is not a gymnasium that's gonna serve us 5 years from now, is it?
I think
It'll be a
it is.
significant improvement.
No question, it'd be a significant
I don't
improvement.
know long term, I'm not sure about the size of the,
What you're doing is you're comparing a 22,000 square foot gym you have now to a 55,000 square foot gym. Significantly better.
No question. Yeah.
But now, in that baseball field, I mean, he's got new, lights for the digital lights, I don't know, what do you call them, Greg?
LED.
LED.
That could be delayed. I mean, I would recommend that we do the primary school first, then bid that, and then you know where you are. I mean, but.
But if
Well, I
you-
think that's got to happen. Primary school's got to happen first. As I said in the earlier meeting, I don't say that there is not a need for a gymnasium. There is definitely a need for gymnasium. I just wonder if, we need to predicate this SPLOST upon that being the end goal for everybody. I know the primary school has to take priority, but this comes in really close, and you do that, and I think we're gonna look back on that gymnasium and say we're cutting corners or things around it when we could have waited just a little while longer. My question earlier about the gym at the primary school, where do we do after-school programs?
At all, the elementary and primary.
At all the primary, okay. So that gym, that PE facility is used for after-school. Okay.
Yes. Greg, what we're actually saying is we've got 22,000, we're adding 32,000, 33,000. So we're just expanding the existing building on the
No.
gym.
No,
We're
No.
building, the existing gym remains exactly as it is at 22,000 square feet. We're not touching it. We're adding a 55,000 square foot gymnasium.
Yeah.
I'm just using that as a comparison in size. You'll be 2.5 times the size of the existing gym.
But in 5 years, how much growth do you expect? 5 or 10 years? I mean,
Well, we're growing. I don't see us surpassing the 2,000 at the high school. Remember, 9th grade's on a separate campus, and there's a gym there that serves their needs to some degree. This would give us 2 gyms on this campus, in effect, 70,000 square feet of gym space, and it would allow the school to, I think, to me, it would allow that high school to last us another 50 years, 30 years now, closer to that. It would allow us to last many more years in the future. The need for the gym is been for years. It's not just this is suddenly we need it. When that school opened, we were just over 1,000 students, 9 through 12 in that one building. We're at 1,400 or so, just 10 through 12 in that building. So we've exceeded that, and we've grown every other part of that building. Classrooms, but we added I taught in the 500 hall, and the 700 hall was just 4 classrooms when the building opened. We added, in the next year or two, Greg, I think, we added 16 classrooms, 2 banks of restrooms, and an office space, and that included in those classrooms 2 science labs. So when we moved in, we kind of already surpassed the capacity of the building. And in that time, since then, we've expanded the cafeteria, the music room addition, the auditorium addition. We've, of course, the multi-purpose building addition. So the one area that has not grown is the gym. And of course, when we opened that gym in 92 or 3, I can't remember which year, we did not play volleyball at that time, which we do. And that's one of our big challenges is they can't let the seats out for volleyball, maybe 2 or 3 rows, so parents bring lawn chairs and.
how much does that gym help your daily? I mean, what's the daily benefit on it?
Well, we would have room for PE. We have kids dressing in the hall, not dressing, but going out in the hallway to take roll, and because they can't all get into the gym, and it's pretty crowded during our PE classes. Maybe not all day, but it is a tight space. This gym is smaller than a lot of Class A school. Terrell County's gym, which is Class A, is much larger than what we have. And it's not about keeping up with the Joneses, it's about providing what our students need. And why not the best for them? And that may go to your question, Frank, but that's something the board is gonna have to set the direction for. And yes, it would require going into another SPLOST, but if we do that, we can commence the projects pretty soon, if the voters approve, of course, it's dependent on that. If we wait, it's gonna be, what my example in the paper today was, it could be 10 more years. Our current 2nd graders, their senior year, we get to step foot in a new gym.
And the cost may be, how much more?
It will be more. There's no way of telling
A lot
how
more.
much more.
Yeah.
Prices will not go down.
Okay, and Gary, Could the after-school program funds, can any of that be used to
Yeah, we can
offset-
do with anything we want to with that project.
Could we offset some of the,
Sure,
the cost
sure.
of the primary modernization?
We could, but, I mean, what I had recommended we do with that is start buying buses,
Oh, okay,
but we wouldn't have to need SPOS funds to buy buses, but like we have been.
okay.
I'm just thinking, and I heard what Blake and, Tom and Bucky said, but I think about church campaigns, and going into campaigns, having a given campaign that given campaign doesn't pay for the project at hand, and asking folks to give to pay off debt for something that was paid for years ago. If there were a way for us to do these projects with a reasonable projection of $18 million in this SPLOST we're asking the voters to vote for, had a list of projects that we knew we could pay for, and then went back to the voters for a specific purpose of building the gym that meets all of our needs, whether or not within the SPLOST we're about to ask them to vote for, we have the ability to prepay some of the current GO bond or not. I think you place it before the voters and you give them an opportunity to cast their vote in support or not. If economic conditions are such that they wouldn't vote for a new GO bond to pay for a new gym that we all thought we needed and wanted, I would argue that the economic conditions were not such that we were gaining ground on that SPLOST and getting close to that $18 million either.
Do you think you could get a vote when it's a single project?
We did for the multi-purpose facility.
I know, but now, at that time, that was going on with the current millage rate that was being levied for that. So this would be an addition. So if they voted that in, it would be voting in a tax increase that would immediately we'd have to start funding.
Mm-hmm.
So this, by delaying the SPLOST, by going into two SPLOST, I mean, we're not increasing any taxes. I mean,
Right.
so personally, I like that idea better, but I mean, that's,
At the point that the voters voted for a GO bond, the voters are voting for that, not us placing it upon them.
right.
That's my point.
Say that again.
With a GO bond, the voters have a say, really, on that specific issue of
And
the
you don't
bond.
think they have a say if it's included in the ballot in November?
Oh, I do. I think that that's a tax, that's a sales tax. That's different than a ad valorem or a tax bill they get from the county every year. And the voters voting for a specific purpose, that's a voter's decision. Yes, ultimately they determine who sits in these seats and makes those decisions. But a general obligation bond is a specific vote for a specific project that at the point that the decision is made, it is a voter's decision that's made.
It is, but it's also asking them to increase their taxes.
That is true.
And would you
Right.
explain that when you put that on the ballot, you'd have to say, this would be an increase in taxes if you vote for this gym specifically?
Right, but I think as a group, y'all got to decide, do we wanna go the GO bond route or do we wanna do multiple SPLOST routes?
I
mean,
don't
yeah.
particularly would like, I mean, I don't wanna see two GO bonds sitting on our balance sheet. And I mean, I would want one GO bond paid off before I hit another one. See what I'm saying? 'Cause
That's a valid point too.
I
How
don't
many years
want
is
too
that
big
now? 12?
liabilities. With the pay, I've got the
Mhm.
payout on it, the payment schedule, we're still a good way out on the first one.
One of the considerations that we had on some of the projects that we proposed initially, back a few months ago, but not recently, was technology. And, you know, in light of it, everything we're facing right now, it is certainly, you know, a strong consideration to buy Chromebooks, but also to buy the devices that we can give the students. So, you know, if they were staying home, they would actually be able to use that technology at home. And, I mean, because of everything being quite as uncertain, and parents also being uncertain about, you know, if they wanna send their students back to school, or if they would like to do a virtual learning in their homes, I think we need to be cautious in not considering technology to be a very significant, you know, item that we would need to put on, you know, to consider for SPOS.
Could you use some of, let's say we have an excess on this SPOS, could you
Yes.
use some of it for technology versus the bus parking lot? That might be a trade, or push it back, or split it
Let
somewhere.
me look at how much we're currently
You think?
doing, but, you remember we made you transfer over to capital projects last year, but, I mean, I would like to save that and see what we're looking at from a COVID standpoint in the budget next year. But that money's there for could be used for technology. We put over about, and Blair here, about $700,000 a year into technology. I think we've got enough Chromebooks now. I don't know, Jason, how many?
We're not one-to-one, but we're very close to that. And then as far as hotspots, I mean, that's certainly something that we have the capability to address that need. It's just that even with a hotspot in some of these rural areas, the internet access is, until we have state or national intervention, that's just not gonna be there for the outlying areas of our community.
I've got friends deep out on 32 that have to come into Oakland's parking lot to complete assignments,
Yes.
literally.
And to put this,
How did Donna's, did you get yours?
Provide
Well,
some hotspots.
you know,
we have a few, but we, you know, I know other systems have purchased a great number of them. They're very costly,
Sure.
because you have a monthly rent and then you have to pay for them. And, you know, but this internet issue is an issue across the state, even, up in Oconee County. They have areas that are as affluent as they are, that don't have quality internet access.
The college kids ran into it when they were sent home.
well, and
College
actually,
kids ran into it when they were sent home.
this past week, I mean, this past week, I mean, AT&T, and you would almost think that we weren't as rural as we are, living right down here. But, you know, we were actually able to get a new service, and I watched an entire webinar this morning, and it never went on. And, I mean, I know that doesn't sound very significant to most of the people sitting in this room. However, it was huge to me.
Sure.
I couldn't believe it, you know, and so there are certain things that are starting to, you know, come into place in these rural areas, and I'm not exactly sure, you know, the cost of these devices. But it's just that we have got to be prepared on all fronts. You know, we've got to certainly consider, you know, what is best for our students within the buildings, but we also need to consider those students that might not be attending, you know, and what can we do to make sure that they have the devices and the remote capability to be able to access what the teachers teach them.
And I agree, and I think we can address that through SPOS, but we also address technology every year.
We do.
And, you know, one of the challenges we have is we have to replace equipment. The life span of a Chromebook is not, you know, forever. It's only 5 years, I believe. And so we're constantly in a replacement. One of the things that we're doing now is we're moving away from purchasing desktop type computers for labs and for teacher desks, and we're going to Chromebook style or laptop style device, because they are so much more capable and they're much less expensive, and we can get more for our dollar with that, and that's something that we're looking at going forward.
What's the timeline again, Jason, on getting this on the ballot?
Well, the plan would be to, bring the ballot, present that at our board meeting Monday just for information, and then the board and their planning meeting on July 27th would actually vote on it. To get it, it has to be, I talked to Blake about this today, our attorney, I think it's 90 days before the election, and that is August 5th, it's the Wednesday, the first Wednesday in August would be the deadline. And so Blake was talking to Veronica Johnson today, and I'm gonna have a phone call with him tomorrow just to,
Is Blake's firm gonna write it?
well, when we've worked with Raymond James and for many years, but we also worked with Blake Sharpton's law firm, they
They
work
get
together
together.
well, and then we've used them for many years.
He's already developed a valid question based on.
Okay.
I guess I'm fine leaving the gym in the list, knowing that we're gonna go through the course of knowing exactly what the cost is gonna be moving forward with the renovations at the primary school, and that's gonna define ultimately what projects we approve going after that. And as long as we stay on the list that the voters approved, we'll take it as it comes.
And I think if it's written, I mean, let's say the gym, it's just not gonna work, the costs don't come in. If it's written broadly, then you go in and pay off debt if you have to. I mean, that would hold a
is
big
part
chunk of
of the
funds if it
question.
did not work out.
You will remember that in this current SPOS, that was, debt retirement was part of that ballot question, and it will be again going forward. And then the board will have some flexibility there. We may not be able to fund that, but we'll have some time to address some other needs, technology, additional buses, those things that are ongoing that we know are gonna be things that we need to consider. So it's really, up to the board's discretion as far as that goes, but then the voters will ultimately decide, depending on what the board decides on the ballot question, what goes on the ballot, and that will be whether we consider going into another SPOS. I'll just say, I know a high school very close to our area that was recently built was, they committed 4 SPOS to build that one building, and that's not uncommon. I'll remind you what Tom said last week, when you look at just the super huge systems, they don't depend on SPOS like we do, but when you look at the other systems that go into multiple SPOS, it's not that uncommon to see.
It's just, it's apples and oranges. I looked at one system in the Atlanta area, their SPOS, $950 million. I mean, it's just.
Have we ever gone into 2 spots before?
We haven't, but that's why we always are coming back with these projects that we talked about 5 years ago.
Okay, what decision do we need to make tonight?
Tonight, information, Monday night, y'all have the first presentation of the budget. And you'll have the first presentation of a ballot question. And then we have budget hearings that will have to happen. And then on the 27th, we will take a vote on the budget at a call meeting. And then we'll have that ballot question also on there at the 27th.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions of Dr. Miller, Gary, or Greg? All right. Hearing no other questions, I'll say we're adjourned. Thank you.